Welcome to Therapy Facts with Dr. Jenn. Today's video is about the video with Diddy and Cassie. And we are discussing point number 4, which is preventing domestic violence. So we talked already in the previous videos about domestic violence, what it is, how to help the victim, and reasons for perpetrating domestic violence. So this video talks about the best way to stop domestic violence, again, is to prevent it on the perpetrator side. So we talk about being able to, domestic violence strategies being able to be used in order to try to control someone else. And so one major prevention of domestic violence perpetration is to teach your children and adolescents and young adults that the best thing they can do for themselves is to control yourself. People who spend their focus on controlling themselves quickly come to see that that is a what? A full-time job. So when young people are oriented to the idea of controlling themselves, toward keeping their hands to themselves, toward not abusing people with name calling and other negative statements, how to communicate and how to solve problems and resolve confrontations and conflicts without negative strategies, then those young people quickly learn that those are lifetime skills that they are engaging in. And so they don't get in their heads about the idea that, oh, because I feel a certain way about myself, or because I want a certain thing to happen, let me go try to control somebody else. They quickly learn that they're consumed with themselves if they control themselves, if it's taught right. Secondly, being able to be realistic about any exposure to domestic violence that a child might experience. And again, or any exposure to neglect or bullying or even plain old physical abuse. Being able to be real about the consequences of that exposure on children and young adults and adolescents and young people in general, to understand that, hey, I need to treat my children and my young people right. I need to take care of them appropriately. I need to show and model healthy behavior toward the children, as well as in relationships that they witness, so that they understand what is acceptable and what is healthy as they grow older. Now, the note about exposure to domestic violence in particular, as I said before, very often people think that, oh my gosh, they have all kinds of mitigating thoughts about their child's exposure to domestic violence, hoping that there'll be no lasting impression or impact on the child's behavior. Well, in fact, there is always a lasting impression and a lasting effect. And so the best thing one can do to prevent their child from engaging in aggressive behavior in general and domestic violence in particular, as a result of having been exposed to domestic violence, is simply to talk about it, to talk to the children and the young people about the unhealthy nature of engaging in domestic violence as a part of regular relationship behavior. Teach them about healthy communication, healthy boundaries, being able to say no and accept no, helping them to understand that there's not one particular person in this world that holds the key to their happiness except for them. Teaching them not to be so invested in another person, especially a peer, to make them happy. And then to also talk to them about what it means to be secure, what it means to be confident, what it means to have great self-esteem, so that they won't put themselves in a situation where they're hoping against hope for someone else to be able to provide that measure of satisfaction for them that they need to provide for themselves, to be able to accept when someone is ready to leave them, when someone no longer wants to play with them, to be able to accept when there are a multitude of playmates that someone wants to be surrounded by, so that even as they navigate whatever their early childhood or early young adulthood experiences might have been, that they don't get themselves in a position where they want to even target someone to try to control for any particular reason. So then, those ones who stumble upon domestic violence, teaching them ahead of time that, again, using tactics to try to control someone that you date is not healthy and is not necessary. Teaching them how to gauge a healthy dating relationship, teaching them how to communicate with people in general in a way that helps them to communicate their needs and help them to get their needs met and help them to figure out how to go somewhere else if their needs are not being met willingly by the people who are currently participating. So that's a lot of conversation. And people don't necessarily think about having these kinds of conversations, especially with young men or boys, again, who are the most common, men are the most commonly detected domestic violence perpetrators, although they are not the only perpetrators. And so these conversations that we are talking about, or that I am suggesting, can be more comfortable in some ways having with girls. However, we must attend to the emotional life of our boys very actively if we want to help them get into adulthood with some emotional self-awareness and some emotional intelligence. It is not going to, that information and that skill set is not going to come by osmosis from the thin air. But what will come by osmosis from the thin air with no conversation is an element of misogyny and the idea that men are more important and better than women. That is so well encapsulated in the world's culture that if we don't specifically have conversations with our boys and our young men to provide an additional set of information, I won't even say to try to counter that, but to provide additional information which allows the boys to make their own decision. If we don't do that very intentionally, then we unintentionally leave the messaging that will come to them from all aspects of the world's culture. So, again, being able to ensure that our boys and young men have a measure of self consciousness or security, not being self-conscious, but being secure and self-confident, and have an understanding of how to build and enrich their own inner life. If we are able to do that, then we are able to prevent a lot of domestic violence from occurring for the reasons of the opposite. And again, for our young men who start because they engage in the behavior just as a way to see what happens, if they have been helped to understand about healthy relationships and how to build a healthy inner life for themselves, they'll never do that. Rather than trying to control someone to get them to meet their needs, they will just move on to the next person, and or they will not engage with people who cannot meet their needs anyway, because they'll have an opportunity to have a skill set that allows them to vet people before they even get involved at that level. So again, the best way to prevent or to stop domestic violence, the best intervention is prevention.